Welcome, everyone. Keith Tebow from FRCMedia. Thank you for joining us today. We've talked a lot about the impacts of COVID-19 across many industries and operations within the city of Fall River. And what we're going to focus on today is local transportation. The Southeastern Regional Transit Authority, SRTA, has been serving the public transportation needs of Fall River and New Bedford, as well as 8 other communities across the South Coast for it'll be 40 years in 2024. And we thought we'd catch up to see how COVID-19 and the pandemic has impacted their operations. I'm pleased to be joined today by the administrator of SRTA, Erik Rousseau. Erik, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us today. Let me just ask you point blank, Erik, since March, how has COVID impacted SRTA, not only in terms of ridership, but in terms of operations at the Transit Authority?
I think it's safe to say that everything has turned upside down. In the past, we were focused on getting as many people onto one bus as possible to maximize efficiency, to demonstrate the value that we're bringing to the public dollar that's being spent on the service that we provide. And as soon as March 11th hit, all of a sudden we were focusing on as much space for each individual as possible and coming up with new solutions to how we handle points of contact, whether it's at the terminals or on the bus, how we try to disinfect, how we communicate all that information and try to be nimble and dynamic all at the same time. So it has been quite a challenge.
How has ridership changed? What was it like prior to March 11th, and what has it been like since? I'm sure a lot of people have been extremely cautious about entering any type of public transportation. We hear it, in Boston in terms of the subway and buses there. How has it impacted SRTA here in our region?
Yeah, we used to average around 10 to 12,000 trips per day on the 20 plus routes that we run. We have an average of 53 buses that are operating each day for the fixed route transportation. And as soon as the stay-at-home order hit, our ridership dropped to about 2,000 trips per day. And we were able to time reducing our level of service just right to match up with the stay-at-home order that happened, I think it was March 25th. We were working very closely with the union and our management company to figure out what exactly the right approach would be. And we came up with a plan probably, it's hard to remember now, probably about March 18th, that on the 25th, we were going to reduce our service from a normal weekday level of service where we run about 5:30 in the morning till about 10 o'clock at night. And then we have high frequency and some of our busier areas to running what we call our Saturday service, where we run about 7 a.m. to about 7 p.m. and we have hourly service. So it's not as convenient, a little bit harder to get around on, but it provided enough service for people to make those essential trips that they needed to make.
Now, has ridership leveled off a bit? Has it improved a little bit since, more people are getting back to work, not to the levels that we've seen, prior to March, but are those levels increasing from, when the pandemic started to now?
Yeah, they are. Not a lot, but we're probably closer to around 5,000 trips per day. We introduced a new service. We're calling it the Intercity Express. It's a bus running between New Bedford and Fall River that's going on 195, so it doesn't stop in between at all. And that's certainly helped with people sort of being able to get between both cities and helped reduce some of the congestion that we were seeing on the traditional intercity Route 9 bus. So, we are seeing areas where it's ticking up. But I think people's habits have changed, and obviously, certainly dining habits have changed. I think that people were more open to just running down the street and grabbing something at the local store. Now people are being a little bit more planful, where they're making a trip, if they can, just once a week and get all their provisions or however it may be. But that has an impact and a trickle-down effect on our ridership.
Yeah. Did you have to take any cost-cutting measures in terms of staff at the authority, in terms of either laying people off or furloughing people as a result of these reductions?
So I can't remember exactly when it came out, but we were a beneficiary of the CARES Act, where $25 billion were allocated to transportation, and in that SRTA benefited from $20 million of funding that was meant to shore up our operations over the next 2 years. One of the big things that we did during all this was to suspend the collection of our fares, to help reduce common points of contact, to help reduce having people within, the riding public within a couple of feet of our operators. And so losing that revenue from the fare box is a bit of a hole to fill, and the CARES Act has really helped with that. So we have not had to lay anybody off at this point.
Now, what are people who maybe used to ride on the sort of buses and maybe haven't in a while and are starting to come back? What are different? Obviously, we have to adhere to social distancing as well as cleanliness. What are some of the things specifically that's been taking place at SRTA to make sure people remain safe and able to get where they need to go?
Yeah, obviously, wear a mask, wear a mask, wear a mask. If you need a mask, just ask. We have plenty of masks available. We're happy to help with that. A couple of things that we're doing is we are looking at eliminating service on the Fall River Route 6, and two routes in New Bedford are going to be truncated, where the New Bedford Route 6 will only run about half of what it used to, and the New Bedford Route 5 will only run about half of what it used to. And those efforts are really because we need more physical assets. It's not a budget issue, it's a number of buses issue. And what we need those buses for is to be able to serve those congestion periods during the day, especially in Fall River. We work very closely with Fall River schools, transportation in the morning and the afternoon. And we're seeing some of our busier corridors really pick up. So in an effort to make sure that we don't have overcrowding on the buses, we need additional buses out there running that same service.
Now, I want to get back to the service changes in just a moment, but back to the cleanliness and making sure people remain safe. What's the protocol of the buses? How often are they cleaned? Every day when they come back in, when they come in for service? How does that work?
Yep, they're being cleaned pretty frequently, certainly every day at a minimum. And we've been trying, especially when we had reduced service, to clean them every trip. Now that service is starting to pick up to more of a traditional level, we won't be able to clean them every trip, but we're still trying to make sure that we're cleaning at least a couple of times throughout the day on each bus, because obviously that's a really important part of this.
All right, you had mentioned some of the changes that are coming. That some will actually they're going to take effect on August 24th, so not as of yet. You mentioned the Route 6 service in Fall River, the Route 6 bus in Fall River. What was the determination of making that happen? I know it's going to be fairly discontinued, but when the school time comes, there may be some limited service. So talk about the reasoning behind that change.
Yeah, again, the big thing that we looked at is we were trying to identify areas in our system where there's redundant service. And the Fall River Route 6 runs hourly right now and is largely exactly the same service that the local intercity bus is operating. So it was an opportunity for us to not eliminate service to a corridor, but get a bus that we can use elsewhere, when we have peak needs. It's not an easy decision to make. It's certainly not necessarily written in stone that it'll last forever. Right now, this is just a COVID, a COVID pilot that we need to try and see if that'll free up some assets for us. And same thing in New Bedford, we had two buses that were duplicating what a third bus was already doing, or a third route was already doing in different ways. So, again, that's a hard decision to make. People are used to riding their bus from, where they normally get on to where they want to go, and having to make an extra transfer downtown is hard if that's the way that somebody needs to make a trip. But if we hear loud and clear from the riding public that we need that service back, that's something we can absolutely do. Again, this isn't a budget issue. It's an issue with having enough physical vehicles available to us.
Right. Being a graduate of BMC Durfee High School back in the day, I rode a SRTA bus to go to Durfee High School. That service still exists and continues. Have you heard any news from the school department in terms of the status of that this year when school reopens? I know the school department's still working on its plans in terms of reopening in the fall. I guess what role will SRTA play? Could there be a reduction in the number of buses there as well?
I wouldn't see a reduction in the number of buses. No, if anything, we may have additional buses. I've been working very closely with them. They haven't announced their final plan, and I know that that's something that's supposed to be coming soon. But we're trying to position ourselves to be able to respond to their demand as best as we can. So, again, we would not see a reduction in the number of buses that are out there. If anything, we'll see 2 or 3 more.
Okay. The Transit Authority is in the midst of trying to find out more information from its riders and the people it service. I know you're in the middle of conducting a survey. I believe that's part of a 5-year type survey. Talk a little bit about that and what does it mean for the authority?
Yeah, we're working with MassDOT on doing a 5-year planning effort. Actually, our survey just closed. But we had very good respondents. It's a very good response rate for it being exclusively online. That's something that's different for us. We always make an effort to do things out in the public at venues where we can have everybody come out and speak their mind. That is obviously a very important thing to us. So we won't make final decisions based on the survey alone, but it does help inform the planning process over the next 5 years and helps us put together a comprehensive look of all the vehicles that we have and the routes that we're running and making sure that we're aligning up our assets with our demands as best we can.
My final question for you today is to look into your crystal ball and see what the immediate future of SRTA is. And I guess a lot of this 5-year planning process may play a little role into it. When you have COVID in there, it sort of puts a fork in the middle of the road. So where do you see maybe potential growth at the authority? You mentioned the inner city route, which has started, which is the direct nonstop between the 2 cities. Do you see that maybe continuing? I guess, how do you foresee the authority moving forward?
Yeah, it's hard to see in that crystal ball. I think it's covered with dirt and buried under asphalt or something right now. But right now, the focus is on some of our core areas. If you were to think of the road Route 6 and 195 as a corridor, and certainly North and South Main and Fall River as a corridor, and North-South connections in New Bedford as a corridor, we're seeing a lot more growth in those very main arteries. So we're trying to focus on ensuring that we have enough service there. And honestly, past COVID, it's hard to know. Will ridership recover? We used to provide 2.7 million trips annually. If we're at 40% of that, what does that mean? Those are a lot of hard questions. Collecting fares is something that has supported the system for years. We usually collect around $2 million in fares. If our ridership is cut in half, that means that we're probably only collecting $1 million in fares. And what's the long-term trickle-down effect of that? So we are looking hard at ways we can address some of those issues. But to be honest, I think it's going to take a while for our ridership to recover. So it'll be hard for us to know exactly what's going to happen even 2 years from now at this point.
Right. Never mind next week, right?
Yeah.
Let me just ask you, I said one final question, but I do have a follow-up based on your answer there. How do you look at, you don't want to see fares go up, obviously, right? People that rely on public transportation usually have needs that, financially, that they're taking public transportation to get to one place or another. How do you look at, raising fares, and, how will all this that's been happening play into that even, in the next year or so?
Yeah, I mean, we're not in a place where we would be able to raise fares. We actually just conducted a survey of our ridership finished up in January, where we call it a fare equity analysis to see if our fare is in line with our peer systems and in line with the the demographics of our communities. And we're not in a position, and our communities are not in a position where we could ask our patrons to pay any more for their fares. So it's a challenge. We have to be creative, whether it's coming up with a new way to allow more access. Something that we'd like to see if we're paying fares in the future is to do something called pay as you go or fare capping, where you might be able to have set up an account, and every time you ride the bus, you're kind of earning credit towards a monthly pass, so you don't have to pay that $40 up front. If you pay $1.50, $1.50, $1.50, eventually it will roll up to that $40 pass, and you might be able to effectively ride for no additional charge for the last 7-10 days of a month. Things like that, something that helps more access, is really what we're going to be focusing on.
Yeah. All right, Erik Rousseau, the administrator of the Southeastern Regional Transit Authority, SRTA. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk again soon and get an update for people. I
Great.
appreciate
Thank you so
your time.
much for having me.
All right, you're welcome. And thank you for joining us here at FRC Media. Have a great day.